lights in the dead of night, thriller echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive. Fighting tooth and nail just to survive. City's heartbeat echoes in our chant. Grit and glory is all we want. Brooklyn to Queens, hear the roar. From laughter to blood in every scar. Living legends made on this ground. From silence we scream, make a sound. Rising high, falling low, repeat again. Cycles of the game, addicted to the pen. Graffiti tales, spray on the wall. Met saga, forever stand tall. Rivals smear, but we push on through. Every heartbeat bleeds, orange and blue. Grimace fades.
Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, round-table podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show and let's go Mets.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Talk Live morning edition right here on the channel. Hopefully, everybody's enjoying their Monday, getting ready for work or on their way to work or at work. We are live right now. A little bit of a morning edition because of the breaking news late last night. If you have not heard that the Mets have signed a veteran starter, Frankie Montas, to a 2-year, $34 million deal with an opt-out after the first year, $17 million a year. And if anybody is going a little nuts over this signing, you got to understand that pitching is going to be more expensive this year. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. You know, when Yusei Kikuchi got $21 million, who didn't have that much better of a year overall than Frankie Montas, if you look at the overall numbers, it's kind of a bargain deal if you really think about it. Last year, everybody thought it was a complete overpay for Luis Severino, who had, basically a 6.5 ERA last year. And not saying that Frankie Montas is going to do what Severino did last year, but you don't need him to be Severino last year. You don't even need him to be Manaea this year. You got to remember, going into last offseason, signing Manaea, signing Severino, what was happening here? The Mets weren't making big signings. The Mets were, getting, middle of the road pitchers, guys that need bounce back years in their careers to get bigger contracts. That's basically what it was. That's what Manaea was. That was what Severino was. Those were the big signings of this rotation. That's what it was. It just ended up being Manaea finding himself, changing his mechanics, and becoming basically an ace of a staff, and Severino becoming a very solid pitcher. The last time he pitched as well, he was a New York Yankee. So this is not saying that Montas is going to be either of those guys, but we're not expecting him to be a number 2 or a number 3. Definitely not a number 1. He's going to be a 4th, 5th, or 6th starter. That's what he's going to be. And at the moment, Tyler McGill would be your 6th starter or your 5th starter at the moment. I'd rather go with the veteran than Tyler McGill that nobody wants on this team. This is the guy in Frankie Montas that could have a little bit better of a season, right? His strikeout rate was up more than what it was the last couple of seasons, right? The last time he had his strikeout per 9, as good as it was last year, was in 2021 when he had a really good season. And what did David Stearns tell you? They need to add innings to this rotation. They lost almost 400 innings in their rotation. You got Severino 180, you got Manaea 180, you got 170 for Quintana. That is a lot of innings to replace, right? Frankie Montas threw 150 innings last year. Remember, he played for 2 teams. He played for Cincinnati and then got traded to Milwaukee. Now, he is prone to giving up the home run ball, but when you play in Cincinnati and Milwaukee, which are bandboxes, you go into Citi Field, it helps a little bit. And that was the same thing we talked about with Severino and the same thing with Manaea. They were playing in ballparks that, you know, weren't very pleasing. You know, Manaea in San Francisco basically wasn't even a starter anymore. They threw him in the bullpen. And Severino was terrible with the Yankees. So we all know that this isn't, if this was one of the bigger signings at the top of the rotation, I would have a major problem with it. But we all know it's not. This is a very simple back end of the rotation, depth rotation type of move. That's exactly what it is. This basically takes Tyler McGill out of the rotation. And I think we can all be happy about that, right? Nobody trusts Tyler McGill. This is basically a spot where you kick McGill out of the rotation. He's in the minors. He's about the 7th or 8th guy in this rotation. And this does not stop the Mets from getting either Severino or Manaea, or bring in Mark Burley, or bring in, you know, a top line starter like a Burnes, or trade for Castillo or a Crochet. It doesn't do that at all. So it really doesn't stop any of that. And that's what I like. And John, I appreciate it, buddy. And look, did I see it the report last night, and I'm like, did I jump up out of my seat and, you know, start pumping my fist? No. Right. But I guarantee you, most Met fans last year around the same time when we signed Severino, I mean, me and Chris went live when Severino got signed by the Mets, and there was about 85% of Met fans that hated that move and paid him $13 million. And obviously, pitching price-wise has gone up. So average pitchers are going to get between $3 and $4 million less than the qualifying offer. That's exactly what happened last year. Last year, the qualifying offer was around 18, 19. So you're going to get average pitchers getting between $13 and $15 million, a little bit lower, a few $1 million lower than a qualifying offer. Your average pitchers are going to get that have, I mean, look at Kikuchi. Kikuchi had over a 4 ERA. Montas have a 4 ERA. Montas got $4 million less per year. And this is basically a 1-year deal. This isn't a 2-year deal. This is a 1-year deal similar to the Manaea deal, where he can opt out if he has a good season. And if you haven't noticed, it worked wonders for Frankie Montas. And now some people are talking on social media that the reason why the Mets got Montas is because Sean Manaea are best friends with each other. And, you know, they've been, you know, obviously they grew up together basically in the Oakland A's organization. And that's one of the reasons why Stearns signed him. Now, I'm not going to necessarily go that far. I honestly think, you know, Manaea is not going to just come to the Mets and take a more of a discount because Montas is there. I mean, it could be what they're setting it up for, but I doubt it. And Irv, you know, you could say you bet Tyler McGill's in the rotation, but then you know, if that's the case, then it's a bad offseason for the Mets. This is one of many sign-in/trades for this rotation, right? If Tyler McGill's in this rotation, that means the Mets are only going to get one more starting pitcher. Kodai Senga is going to be your ace, or somebody else is going to be your ace, and you're going to use one of your young kids like a Sproat in your rotation. I'm not very confident going into the year with that. And if that's the case, that would have been a better rotation last year and better signings last year than it was this year. So it's only a bad signing. And we talked about this with Severino and Manaea, right? Well, Herb, why has McGill ended up in the rotation? Because of injuries. You know, it wasn't because it was a necessity, right? If guys didn't get hurt last year in the rotation, like Senga, right? Quintana for a little while, right? If guys didn't get hurt, McGill wouldn't be in the rotation. You know, you can't predict injuries. You can't. You just can't. You know, the Yankee, when he was a Yankee and the Yankees traded for him, it was a weird situation because he was already injured in Oakland, and the Yankees said when they traded for him that you got to pitch, and he was hurt. So I'm not even looking at that year as a problem. Like the Yankees, once again, screwed up another pitcher just like they did Severino. And then if you look the following year when he went to Cincinnati and pitched for Milwaukee as well last year, it was an okay season. I'm not going to tell you it was a really good season. And Herb, yes, someone always gets hurt. Absolutely. But you also need depth pieces as well. right? I would be very okay if Tyler McGill is my 7th or 8th starter and in the minors and only needed if somebody gets hurt. Like, that's what happens. Look at the Dodgers. You think the Dodgers wanted Glass now? Or did you want to see their bullpen games in the postseason, right? You can't predict injuries. You can't be afraid to sign depth pieces and sign rotation arms and not worry about worry about injuries. You're gonna have to worry about injuries, but you can't go into the season signing 13 pitchers and keep 5 of them in, 5 of them in the minors, and then you have a 5-man rotation. And we also have to remember it's probably going to be a 6-man rotation. So if there's going to be a 6-man rotation, right, there's a lot more moves to come, right? For all we know, Frankie Montas could be the 6th starter, right? We still might sign Mark Burley. We still might sign Minaya or Severino. I still feel very confident in saying that the Mets are going to trade for Castillo or Garrett Crochet or sign Burnes, or maybe even Max Fried for that matter. I'm not very keen on Max Fried, but I feel like one of those moves are going to happen. And if one of those moves happen, you're pushing everybody back, right? Whatever starter you want, right? Say if it's Crochet, Castillo, Burnes, Fried. Let's say it's those 4 guys, right? I think we can all agree those are the 4 guys on the trade market and the free agent market. If you get one of those guys, you put him at the top of your rotation. That pushes Senga back to number 2. David Peterson is either going to be a 3 or a 4. Say the Mets sign Minaya. Well, there's your number 3 starter, right? So you already got 4 guys already in your rotation that you already have set to go. You'll have, let's say Max Fried, right? You got Max Fried, you got Kodai Senga, you got Sean Minaya, you got David Peterson, you got Frankie Montas. Now, this is not a situation where you're going to go crazy and say, oh, what a great rotation. But it's not bad when you got an actual ace. Remember, the Mets didn't really have an ace. Let's hold up on Sean Minaya calling him an ace. He had a really good season last year, and he started to get going later in May when he changed up his mechanics and everything like that, more like Chris Sale. So yeah, he pitched like an ace, but you're not signing him to be an ace. So if he gets a 4-year deal from somebody, you're probably not going to sign him. So if you get an ace of his staff in a Max Fried, Corbin Burnes, Garrett Crochet, Luis Castillo, whoever, that's a top-line starter. It helps your rotation because I think we have to understand that you don't need the best rotation in baseball was the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners did not make the playoffs. So for everybody who just believes that pitching is everything, it's not. It is not. It's important, absolutely. But again, how many times have the Mets had really confident rotations going into the season and it just didn't amount to nothing? I'm not going crazy over the rotation. Give me a quality rotation, which basically last year was, and you'll win games. If your pitching gives you a chance to win every day, if your starter gives you a chance to win every single day, you got an opportunity to win, right? The Mets, everybody loves Severino, loves Minaya. Everybody can't wait to see Kodai Senga back and, other guys like that. The Mets rotation had the most walks, basically the most walks in baseball. So let's not act like, and everybody said that the pitching was one of the aspects of the Mets getting to where they were, which is absolutely true. But it also took the offense to get to the level that they were supposed to get to start making a run in the season to make the playoffs. And that's where we are. Yeah, Herb, exactly my point, right? And I'm not saying it's like the new recipe of winning the World Series and, let's not have an ace and get hurt, right? No. The Rangers had DeGrom, they had Scherzer, they traded for Scherzer, right? They didn't even help them get to the World Series. So I'm not saying that's a great recipe. I don't want to be the Dodgers and the Rangers and hope that bullpen games with no ace wins me a World Series, right? There is a little bit of luck involved, but let's not act like the pitching was the main reason why the Dodgers won. It wasn't the case. It was mostly the offense. They bludgeoned people to death in the playoffs. And the Rangers, the same thing. Go looking at playoffs, right? The pitching didn't do anything in that series. They were pitching 4 or 5 innings at best, and their offense basically took over the playoffs. And that's what it is. And that's why I keep saying that. That's why I keep saying there's going to be one big name that's going to be in this rotation, and you're going to fill the rest of the rotation with a Manaea or a Severino or a Buehler, excuse me. A Buehler, something like, those combination of guys, along with David Peterson, with Kodai Senga, with Montas, and those guys are going to be your 6-man rotation. Again, if I say tomorrow the Mets sign Corbin Burnes, Kodai Senga is your number 2, they sign Sean Manaea, there's your number 3. You got David Peterson, number 4, right? You got Frankie Montas, and I'm sorry, say if they sign Buehler, so it'll be Buehler and then it'll be Frankie Montas. There's your 6 men, right? I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think it's a bad rotation at all, especially if you have an ace. If you have an ace, every 5th day you can count on that ace, which the Mets did not have last year. You couldn't count on an ace until basically June when Manaea figured it out. And at that moment, you weren't considering Manaea an ace at all, right? All we were talking about until Manaea basically went crazy was the Mets needed a starting pitcher. Yet they got Paul Blackburn. So, and yeah, Herb, exactly. And that's why I think the Mets are going to spend a hell of a lot more money on the lineup. If that's Soto, Alonso, Santander, or Alonso, or something of that nature, I think that you're going to see a couple of big moves on the position player side. If it's Soto or Santander, if it's Alonso and Christian Walker, you're going to get a combination of those guys. It can be, Alonso, Santander. It can be Soto, Christian Walker. It can be Soto, Alonso. I think you're going to add a big time bat or 2 in this lineup, and then we're talking about a really good lineup going into 2025. And I think that's the main thing that we have to understand, right? Go to the teams that made the playoffs. Look at their rotations. A lot of them weren't that scary at all, right? How many people were scared of the Padres because they had the best rotation going into the playoffs, right? Nobody wanted to face them, right? Met fans, when we were in the NLDS, when we beat the Phillies, people wanted to face the Dodgers because they were afraid of the Padres rotation. Yet we faced the Dodgers, and it didn't matter about their rotation because the offense killed us. Right? So it's not always the rotations that have the best rotations are going to go deep in the playoffs in the World Series, because it really doesn't most of the time it really doesn't happen like that. Like, this is not 2015 Mets where the pitching basically took over. Right? It go back to year after year after year and tell me where a rotation took over a World Series or took over a playoff matchup. It really didn't happen. So, we'll see. But I'm not mad at this. The only way I would be mad with this signing is that if Frankie Montas ended up being number 3 in this rotation, I'd be upset about that. Right? If it's Manaea, Buehler in the middle of this rotation, and then you have Peterson, Montas, and then you have a top line starter with Kodai Senga, there's your 6-man rotation, because again, Stearns talked about a 6-man rotation. So I'm not necessarily mad about this signing because it's very early in the offseason, right? Besides Snell and Kikuchi, nobody really is coming off the board. And Montas was one of the top 30 free agents and one of the top 10 pitchers as a free agent. So I'm not mad about it. This is the guy that, even if he pitches to a 4 to a 4.5 ERA, he's a back-end starter. Find me a rotation with the 4th or 5th starter that has anything under a 4.5 ERA. You're not going to find it. So, I dig too many Mets fans, and, people are already laughing about this signing like it's the worst thing since, Severino signing last year. Remember, this isn't something where Severino or Manaea situation where Manaea and Severino were going to be a big part of this rotation. Montas is a 4th or 5th starter, maybe even a 6th starter. So I'm not really worried about that. Well, that's the other thing, Herb, right? Kikuchi, if you look at Kikuchi and Montas' numbers, right, they're very similar overall last year, right? Kikuchi pitched better in Houston when he got traded there, but it was what, 8, 9 starts, maybe 10. If you look at the overall numbers, their numbers are not much more different. Montas has a better strikeout per 9 than Kikuchi, and Montas throws much harder than Kikuchi, right? So it's $4 million more per year, and Montas, this is basically a 1-year deal because he has an opt-out after the first year. Kikuchi is a full 3 years of $63 million. You pay $64 million. You paid him $21 million a year for 3 years, and they're all guaranteed. There's no opt-outs. Here, at least Montage, you get 1 year of $17 million, and he can opt out. And this is a situation where if he has a really good season, he goes back on the market and gets probably a 2-3 year deal, just like a Kikuchi, just like Severino, just like a Minaya would do. And this time, you're not counting on Montas to be a number 2 starter like you were Severino or Minaya, who was basically the ace. You're not doing that for Montas. So it's not much of a difference when you really look at it. And you would say that Montas has better stuff overall than a Yusei Kikuchi, who got 3 years of $63 million, $4 million more than Montas per year. And how much did Severino get last year? He got $13 million. But again, you got to look at the qualifying offer year by year. And that's where the range goes for average starting pitchers, right? Last year, it was around 18.5 to $19 million. Usually, average pitchers were getting between $13 and $15 million. A few $1 million less than a qualifying offer. This year, the qualifying offer was $21 million, right? $21.5 million. So you take away $3, $4, $5 million from the qualifying offer. That's what average pitchers are getting. So where Montas got $17 million is average, is where the average pitcher is going to get paid per year. It's just a fact. It's going to be between 16 to $18 million, right? If somebody had a little bit better of a season overall than Montas, he's probably going to get closer to 18 than 17 or 16. So you got to look the qualifying offer year by year. You can't worry about what Severino got and say, why did Montas get more? You're looking at the qualifying offer. Average pitchers or average players as a whole are going to get per year around a few $1 million less than the qualifying offer. So this is an average deal for an average pitcher because of what the qualifying offer is this year. Next year, when the qualifying offer is $24 million, you can probably see an average pitcher get $19 and $20 million. That's just how it goes. Well, Duran, I don't think you need Boris to tell a player or his client what Minaya and Severino turned into in the Mets organization when it came to the pitching lab and whatever else the Mets did to make them pitch extremely, much better. And, it basically revitalized Manaya's career. And I wouldn't say necessarily it turned up Severino's career, but it made him look like a competent pitcher again. And these guys, there's a possibility that both Minaya and Severino can get 4-year deals here. I think you can probably get Severino on a 3-year deal, but somebody might give him a 4-year deal. And there's a possibility that Minaya might get 4 years. So when you look at, that was the first thing a lot of people put up on social media. You paid Severino $13 million for a 6.5 ERA, but you paid Montas with a 4.5 ERA, $4 million more. You can't look at those comparisons because the qualifying offers were $2 million difference. Again, you're going to see, right? Yusei Kikuchi basically got a qualifying offer plus 2 more years. So for 3 years, he got the qualifying offer. They basically gave him the qualifying offer plus added 2 years. When you give average pitchers less, and these are guys that are going to be mostly in the back end of the rotations in baseball, right? Guys like Montas, guys in that out where it's around the 4.5 ERA, those guys are going to get between 16 and $18 million. That's where they're going to go. You're going to see, right? Quintana is a guy that might get probably a 1-year deal for $15, $16 million because that's where you're going to see the average pitchers get. That's just how it goes. So it's not about comparisons to last year. You can't look at that. Like it's not fair to look at, right? Why didn't a lot of big starters like a Blake Snell get a 6-year deal last year, but got a 5-year deal this year? Because people weren't giving big contracts out to starting pitchers last year for whatever reason. They weren't willing to do that. Other than Yamamoto, nobody really got long-term deals that were at the top of the starting pitching market. They all got 1-year, 2-year deals with opt-outs. So it's just a different offseason. That's why you can't compare last offseason to this offseason, considering the fact that Ohtani is going to get got a crazy massive deal with a lot of deferrals. There's a lot of people believe that Juan Soto ain't going to take $1 million in deferrals. So it really doesn't matter. So yeah, you made it. And that's the other thing too. And the Mets have been extremely good with that, right? All these guys that had good seasons where the Mets basically gave you a 1-year deal or a 2-year with an opt-out, Yamid just said it, right? You signed these guys to a 1-2-year deal. If they opt out or become free agents, you offer them the qualifying offers, just like the Mets offered Severino and Manaea qualifying offers. If they don't return, you get draft picks. And I know that might not, that doesn't excite me, but the organizations really value those draft picks if those guys don't come back. And you have to understand that it's value because you get those draft picks from the other teams that sign those players. And the same thing with Montas. If Montas has a good year, does anybody want to give him a 3-4-year deal? Probably not. Right? Even if he has a good season, say if he has a really good season, he has a 3.7 ERA, pitches really well for the Mets. Are you going to say next offseason to give Montas a 3 or 4-year deal? Probably not. So you give him the qualifying offer. If he takes it, okay, it's only a 1-year deal. Who cares? But he's going to be looking for a multi-year deal. And if he leaves on a 3-year deal, who cares? You get a draft pick and you don't got to pay somebody, which is probably going to be around $21 to $22 million per year, maybe even more, because the qualifying offer is going to increase to probably around $23, $24 million. So you're going to see. And I can guarantee when we're talking about next offseason and the qualifying offer is around $24 million, guess what? You're going to see guys like Montas get average pitchers get between 19 and $21 million, a couple $1 million less than the qualifying offer. So let's see. Would you be upset if Mets rotation ends up being Senga, Manaea, Buehler, Peterson, Montas, Blackburn? Yeah. I'm not gonna. That's why I'm saying that if Montas is one of the bigger signings, because if you really think about it, Manaea and Buehler are the big signings, and Senga is your ace. I'm not going to be happy with that rotation. Now, that doesn't mean that the rotation can't be solid, and that could be more than enough to get you through a season and get you into the playoffs. And then you can get a big time starter at the trade deadline if you wanted to. But I wouldn't be necessarily happy going into that the 2025 season with that rotation. But I don't think it's going to happen. I truly don't believe that. I'd be shocked. Well, Richard, besides Blake Snell, right? Who did the Dodgers got, right? They traded for Glass now, right? Which is still on the table. Richard, but it's still a possibility. Why do you think that Montas is not going to end up being one of the top starting pitchers? Like, getting to one of the top starting pitchers. Montas has nothing to do with a top line starter. You got to fill out a rotation. Right now, we had Kodai Senga and David Peterson. Blackburn's not going to be ready for opening day, as they already said the other day. Blackburn's not going to be ready to start the season because he's recovering from his injury. So, and Roki Sasaki, he's another one, right? He's not allowed to sign until January 15th. So that's also a possibility, right? We'll see. But we gotta understand the logic here. The Mets have to fill basically 4 spots in a rotation. Because right now it's Senga, Peterson, and right now Montas. So you still got 3 spots you have to add because the Mets are going with a 6-man rotation. Yeah, Richard, I understand that. All right, but it's not like the rotation was the reason why the Dodgers made the World Series or made the playoffs. It was the offense. So let's not go crazy on the rotation here. Like the Montas is the last signing the Mets are going to make, because it's not true, right? It's not. Listen, if it's Manaea, Buehler, and Montas as the signings for the Mets, I'm not going to be happy. I tell you that right now. There'll be Met fans that will claim that, oh, well, Manaea was an ace last year. Yeah, for the Mets. That doesn't mean he's going to have another great season. Well, Herb, I tend to agree with you. Now, I think he might do it with Burnes because he's very comfortable and knows Burnes very well from his time in Milwaukee. But again, why couldn't he trade for Luis Castillo or a Garrett Crochet? I still feel like that's more likely. And again, I don't know if you guys listened to Mets Hot Stove last night. Joe DeMayo was on with a WFAN host, Sal Licata, on his podcast. And Joe DeMayo said he thinks it's more likely the Mets trade for a Garrett Crochet or Luis Castillo than give Burnes an 8 to 10 year deal. So it's not that Stearns is looking for a top line starter. It's just a matter of, is he going to pay big money to get one or trade for one? And Joe DeMayo also said that there is a huge logjam in the middle of the infield with their prospects. You can't play them all in the major leagues. You can't keep on leaving them in the minors for year after year after year and slowly lose value. You're going to have to decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you're going to have to use as assets. Because that's another thing, Richard was talking about the Dodgers. Right? Look what the Dodgers have done. Yeah, what have the Dodgers have done? They traded for Jack Flaherty. They traded for Tyler Glasnow. They just didn't sign everybody. Do the Dodgers care about the prospects every single time? No. They've traded for guys. Right? 2 years ago, they traded for Trey Turner. We have to remember that. And sometimes you have to bite the bullet and trade some prospects. You can't keep on holding onto them forever. Right? I still feel like it cost the Mets in 2022 at the trade deadline. I felt like this year they were Stearns wasn't going to trade top prospects to bring in better players in this team in 2024 because he still looked at the prospects as an evaluation year. Right? Maybe that hurt us at the end going to Game 6 in the NLCS. Maybe if we did get a top player on our team, either in the lineup or in the rotation, it might have made a difference or might not. But he wasn't willing to trade any top prospects because this was his first year as president of baseball ops. He was trying to evaluate those prospects. He evaluated them now. And again, I would be shocked if it's not one big starting pitcher the Mets get. Either in a trade or a free agency. If it's free to Burnes or Crochet or Castillo or another starting pitcher that we're not even thinking of at this point, that nobody's talking about and ends up being a top line starter, right? It could be somebody else totally different. We also will see. And again, Joel, that's the other thing too, right? Everybody believes Francisco Alvarez is the catcher of the future. Well, Kevin Parada is very expendable at this point, right? And I still believe between Mauricio, Jet Williams, and Acuna, I truly believe one of those guys are going to be in a package. And listen, if Garrett Crochet, if the Mets can get him for a Jet Williams, Kevin Parada, and throw a Jeff McNeil in there, or throw somebody else in there that's major league ready, right? A lot of people believe Jet Williams is major league ready, and Kevin Parada is probably like a year or two away. You could do that. You might have to add another lower level prospect. Fine. But again, we're looking at Garrett Crochet here, who has 2 years left on his deal. And it's looking like whoever trades for Garrett Crochet is going to give him an extension. You're buying out 2 arbitration years. So you're automatically going to get a discount by extending him, right? You might get him for between $110 and $140 million for a 5-6 year period compared to a Max Fried, who is also a lefty, but a couple of years older with a couple of injuries. So you got to look at it that way too. You might get Fried for 160 million over 5 years, but Garrett Crochet is a couple of years younger, has less innings on his arm, and you get him for a much overall better contract And you don't have to pay Burnes $250 to $280 million over 8 to 10 years. You could do it that way as well. So again, what the Mets, I still believe this, and Joe DeMaio said it on that podcast. It's more likely the Mets trade for a top line starter than signing a Corbin Burnes or a Max Fried. Now, if you trade for a Luis Castillo, he has 5 years, $105 million left on his contract. The 5th year is a vesting option. So it's basically a 4-year deal worth around $85 million. So that's not terrible at all either. If you do that, right? I don't think Luis Castillo is as good as he once was, but you could do a lot worse with somebody that has a 3.4 ERA, and maybe a change of scenery, he might be even better. With a little bit of mechanic changes and pitching lab that the Mets have, that has worked wonders for two guys that are going to get multi-year deals in Severino and Manaea, we can see how that can work out. So, the winter meetings is less than a week away. It starts on Sunday. So I think the Mets are going to be very active, right? This is one sign-in of probably many in the rotation, along with a trade situation as well. If I have to put a rotation together, if it's me, yeah, Todd, I understand that Burnes' K rate is on the decline. I'm not too worried about that, right? If that's all you care about as a fan with a rotation arm, I don't really care. Now, K per 9 scares me more with bullpen arms, right? If I see a decline in bullpen arms, K per 9, that's when I get concerned, because you need bullpen arms to strike guys out, right? You need them to get that big out, that big strikeout. Rotation arms, who cares how you get out, right? Burnes had a really good season. Just because his K per 9 was down, what did that really mean? Did his ERA jump up a full run? No. It went up maybe like 0.2. Not much more than that. Right? I don't care how a starting pitcher gets batters out. Just get them out. Right? Corbin Burnes, strikeouts per 9 went down, but you know what went up? Innings. He pitched longer in games because the strikeouts per 9 were down. Right? Why do I care if his strikeouts went down or up? That doesn't mean that he just lost his stuff and can't strike out guys. Maybe it was a different situation where he didn't want to strike out a ton of guys, or didn't plan on striking out a lot of guys to stay longer in games, right? Because, again, he was with the Baltimore Orioles. What did the Baltimore Orioles didn't have? They didn't have much of a bullpen. So you needed your starters to go longer, and that was the point of Corbin Burnes. I truly believe that's the case. So even if his Ks per 9s are down, unless his ERA jumped up to a 4, why am I worried about that? Like, let me just double check right now. If you give me a quick second. All right, here we go. All right, give me a second, guys. Let me just double check something. So, I mean, last year he had a 2.92 ERA. Do you really think I care about a K per 9? Absolutely not. Well, Herb, it's not, though, right? What's concerning about that? Right? Here's a perfect scenario, right? In 2023, he had a 3.39 ERA. In 2023, that's where his K rate was up and his velocity was up. In the following year with Baltimore, he had a 2.92 ERA and his Ks per 9. Let me just double check it right now. Ks per 9. His Ks per 9 were 9.3 in 2023 and 8.4 in 2024. One strikeout less per inning. Yet his ERA was basically 0.4 better. Nearly almost a half a run better. So what are we worried about here? And he's 29 years old, going to be 30. We're looking at the wrong things here, guys. He, again, thrown 32 starts, 194 innings, 181 strikeouts. His strikeouts were down a little bit. But again, if you average it out, one strikeout less per game, per batter or per inning, it adds up to 20 strikeouts less. But his ERA went down 0.4. So what are we worried about here? Do we care about ERA anymore? because that's what I care about. Don't give me the K per 9 nonsense, because this is just unnecessary analytical stats that does not really matter. Did he get the guy out? That's what mattered. His ERA went down 0.4. It went from a 3.39 to a 2.92. Do you really think I care about a K per 9? You got to be nuts if you're talking about that. He had a better season in 2024 than 2023. If you only look at K per 9, of course you're going to be a little disappointed, but it was one less strikeout per inning, but yet his ERA went down. So you know what that tells you? He got more outs than he did in 2023. That's all he did. So it's not that much. So it's like, relax, guys. Like, we're looking at it completely wrong, right? The Mets didn't have a Burnes last year. Even Manaea wasn't even that good. It's perfectly okay that his strikeout per 9 went down 1 point. It's not a lot. If it went down 3 or 4, maybe it's a little concerning, but his ERA went down. He hasn't had that bet. His 2024 season has been his best season since 2021. And if you want to go a little bit earlier, he had a 2.94 in 2022. So he had a better season than 2021, 2022, and his second best season was last year compared to his 2021 season when he had a 2.43. So he's fine. We're acting like Corbin Burnes had a 4 ERA. Now, if his strikeout rate went down like it did a full point, and his ERA went up to like 3.8, 3.9, that's where you worry. So, and you'd be nuts if you don't want Corbin Burnes, because he had a better season than the year that you're talking about. You're talking about a strikeout rate that was better this year than last year than it was this year, but his overall numbers, besides strikeouts, were better. Even if you look at it, just to go a little bit deeper here, right? If you want to talk about his strikeout rate, well, why aren't you talking about his walk per 9, right? His walk per 9 went down a full point. So why aren't we talking about that? Maybe those higher strikeouts are leading to more walks. Now his strikeout went down, but his walk rate went down. So you can look at it many different ways. You can't just take one stat and say, oh my God, his strikeout rate is down, but not talk about his walk rate, which is another annoying stat that I can care less about. And he had 20 less walks than he had the year before. So he had a better season. And Chris, I agree with you. The walk per 9 needs to be fixed with Montas, right? But again, we're looking at Montas here. Well, I don't know if Chris is not. I know that for a fact. But this is the guy that's going to be a 5th or 6th starter in the rotation, right? If Montas is a 4th starter, lower than that, 3 or 2, then we're going to have some problems. Well, yeah, I understand that. But if you really look at it, Todd, again, we're looking at the wrong – look, strikeout per 9, right? It went to 13.3, 12.6, 10.8, 9.3, 8.4, right? But also look at the overall strikeout rates in baseball. They were also going down as well, right? So again, but if you want to talk about it, look at the walk rate, right? It went from 1.8 to 2.3 to 3.1 to 2.2. So we can look at a lot of things here, right? His home run rate per 9 didn't go down. It was basically the same, right? Hits per 9 went up 1 point, right? But his whip is 1.096, right? ERA plus is 128, right? His strikeouts were down, but obviously when you have 1 less strikeout per 9, it's going to go down around 20 strikeouts, which is fine. But he had 20 less walks. He gave up the same amount of home runs over the last 3 seasons, so that didn't hurt him, right? He gave up a little bit more hits, but he threw 194 innings, and his ERA was 2.92 in a bandbox in Baltimore. So we got to look at it a lot of different ways, right? You can't just bring up, strikeouts per 9 and then not bring up the walks per 9. right? We can fit a narrative. I can fit a narrative. You can fit a narrative. But if you don't want Corbin Burnes because of his strikeout per 9, then you're probably not going to find a better starter that has a 2.92 ERA. And that was Guy Crochet. That's Luis Castillo. That's Max Fried. You're probably not going to find better than that. You know, you can look at it any way to fit a narrative. But to say that you're concerned about the strikeouts per 9 for Corbin Burnes, then you also got to bring up his walk rate. His walks per 9 are down. His overall numbers were better than the year that you're talking about, right? You know, we take strikeouts with better pitching, but that's not always necessarily the case. Again, look what he pitched last year. He threw 194 innings, right? He's throwing around 200 to 190 innings. He's still giving you the amount of innings, even with a little bit less strikeout rate. So it's fine. Like, again, we do a lot worse than Corbin Burnes. You give me Corbin Burnes. If anybody has a problem with that, then I'm going to take you for somebody who doesn't really want to win and just wants the Mets to lose so you can complain. It's just that simple, guys. I think that's fair to say. So, Frankie Montas, 2 years, $34 million with an opt-out after 1 year. It's basically a 1 year, $17 million a year deal. Again, there's some people saying, oh, it's a complete overpay. It's not when you look at the qualifying offer. The qualifying offer has a lot to do with what you pay average players, right? And again, go back. If you want to compare Severino to Montage, you do it this way. What was the qualifying offer last year? It was around 18.5 to 19, right? That's what it was. I think it was $19 million. So you got between a little less with Severino because he had a terrible year. Montas didn't have a terrible year. He had an average year. Average pitchers are pitchers who have between a 4.3 to a 4.8 ERA. That's basically where an average pitcher is who's a back-end rotation guy, a fifth starter, basically. Right? You're going to give those guys a little less than a qualifying offer, which is around $3 or $4 million less. That's basically what Montas got. He got $4 million less than a qualifying offer. That's what happens. Yusei Kikuchi basically got the qualifying offer, but got 2 more guaranteed years. Let me ask you guys something. Do you want a 1-year deal, $17 million for Montas, or 3 guaranteed year deals for $21 million for Yusei Kikuchi, who is basically a number 4 starter? He signed with the Angels, but basically he's going to be like the number 2 starter. So I don't want to pay $21 million for 3 years for Yusei Kikuchi, who's basically has a similar ERA to Montas, even though Kikuchi had a little bit better season. But is that worth $4 million more with 2 more guaranteed years? Absolutely not. So, well, Todd, he does see again. We're looking at contracts based on what he did in Milwaukee. That is not fair to compare him to Milwaukee, because the owner never gave money for him to sign long-term deals for pitchers, right? But he traded for Yelich and gave him a big-time deal. He's willing to give long-term deals to position players. Now, we don't know now that he has money that he's willing to give Corbin Burnes an 8-9 year deal. There's a lot of Mets fans that don't want to give 8-9 years to a pitcher. And I would be okay with that. But don't tell me that you're going to get Buehler and Manaea and there's your rotation, right? You got to get one of the top starters here, either in a trade or in free agency. Well, Herb, that's fine, right? I understand not giving Burnes an 8-year deal, right? I'm always concerned about giving pitchers long-term deals, right? You know, could they be good for half of it? Yeah, he could be a great starter for 4 or 5 years of that contract, right? But then it gets a little tricky after that. Now, I'm one to not give a damn and give me 5 good years out of the 8 years, and I'm okay, right? You think the Yankees cared about giving Sabathia a long-term deal? He basically had 3 really great seasons. After that, he wasn't that good. But you didn't care because you got a World Series title with that contract. So that's the point, right? I think Stearns is more confident in giving position players long-term deals because they're more likely to stay healthy than a pitcher. Again, if Corbin Burnes was the only one that was available, I think the Mets probably would have no choice. But they have choices, right? If you want to go to Max Fried route, which I know Chris is on board of doing and a couple other people are, if you're willing to give him a 4 or 5 year deal, I would be okay with Max Fried being the ace. I would be a little worried because I don't trust him to stay as healthy as some people might. But you also have other options, right? Garrett Crochet, Luis Castillo. We might even not know of a starter that might be available that's a top line starter that we don't even know about, and he ends up on the Mets. So we don't know if it's just those guys. But I would be shocked, and I think most people will, if one of the top line starters, either in a trade or free agency, is not a New York Met. And you could do a lot worse with Corbin Burnes. Would I rather have Crochet or Castillo because of the fact that I don't like giving 8-year deals or more to a starting pitcher? Yes, I would. But I'm not going to cry about if they get Corbin Burnes for 8 years, $250 million. I can care less. He's our ace for the next 5 years at least. Because he is 29 years old. He's going to turn 30 just now. So you get him basically in your prime for 3 to 5 years. Oh, yeah, Joel, we all knew it was bullshit with Adames and that contract offer. We all knew it was. Now, don't get me wrong. Did the Mets speak to Adames? Yes. But Adames can be a possibility if Pete Alonso goes elsewhere, considering that Vientos will go to first and Adames will play third base. I know that's not ideal, but that's also like a plan C situation. And again, we all have to remember that the New York Mets have many options this year where they can still have very good offseason. Even a plan C, right? If I tell you the Mets signed Juan Soto, but they signed Willy Adames to play third and put Vientos at first base, is that a bad season? Offseason? Absolutely. And say sign Corbin Burnes or one of the top pitchers. They get Crochet or Burnes or Fried or Castillo, one of those 4 guys in the top line. Say if they get Burnes, Soto, Adames. They put Vientos at first base. That's probably a plan C, and that's a very good offseason. Plan B is probably like, I would say, Max Fried, Soto, and Christian Walker. Right? That's probably plan B. Plan A is Burnes, Soto, Alonso. Right? All 3 of those plans are very good offseasons. Now, one's probably a little better than the other, but it's still a very good offseason. I don't think most people can complain about any of those plan A, B, or C's. And we would be okay with that most likely. And you already have a better lineup than you did last year. That's including Nimmo. Hopefully a better season from Alvarez. Then you talk about with Soto, with Nimmo, with Francisco Lindor, with Vientos. And you're adding either Adames and Soto or Soto and Alonso. Like, that's a huge difference in the lineup. That's, you're adding more home runs than you had the following season. You're adding better hitters. That's a huge difference. So, Danette and Anthony, would you do Burnes for 6 years, 240? Absolutely. We would all love that, but I don't think he's getting 6 years. I think he's either getting 7 or 8. Probably 8. And that worries me. If I get him on a 6-year deal, we can do that deal today. But I don't think he's going to do that. He's a Boras client. He's a free agent. This is his one big contract in his career, probably. I do think the fact that he's probably going to get a 7 or 8 year deal. And obviously, if it's 7 or 8 years, you're going to get it up to 260, 270 million. And again, I'm willing to do that. Right? I will take 8 years on Garrett Crochet. I would be hesitant, but I would give it to him, knowing that you're probably going to get 5 really damn good seasons from Corbin Burnes and hope for the best to follow in 3 years. Because you hope you win within them 5, at least the first couple of years of that contract. That's plan F of bad defense. Vientos at first. Yeah, we see, I wouldn't call Vientos. See, nobody thought Vientos can play third base as well as he did. I think Vientos can be a solid first baseman. Just based on his performance at third base, I think that he worked hard at third base. And if you give him a full spring training to play first base, I think he'll be fine. Can he be just like Pete Alonso? That's more than enough, right? Defensively. I think that's fine. But you're also adding 30 home runs with Adames, and you also adding another 30 home runs with Juan Soto. So it's not really a plan F for whoever said that. I forgot who said that. Hold on, let me find Herb. A plan Vientos at first, Adames at third. But look, Adames has never played third. But again, shortstops are versatile, right? Everybody wants Acuna to play second base. He's a shortstop. Mauricio was playing second base and third base. Jet Williams is going to play either center field, second base, or third base. So shortstops are the one guys in your organization that can play probably second or third with no problem. A-Rod, one of the best shortstops in baseball, moved to third base when he was a Yankee, right? You can do that. So I don't worry about shortstops moving to third base at all because the range is going to be there. Yeah, he's got to learn to cut off situations and all that stuff, but you're a baseball player. You're going to know that. So I wouldn't be worried about Adames at the base at all because he's a shortstop. Shortstops have quick reaction times. They got better range, and they're more versatile than anybody else on the diamond. So I'm not worried about that. Herb, I agree with you, but that's plan A. That's what I'm saying. But you can't complain about any plan I gave you because they're solid off seasons, and all of them involve really damn good players, right? You can sign Santander, Alonso, and Burnes, and that's a really good offseason. You can get Adames, Christian Walker, Soto. You can get Adames, Alonso, and Santander. You can do a lot of different ways. There's like 4 or 5 different plans where you're going to have a good offseason. And it's hard to say any of them would be bad. Yeah, exactly, Easy. Look at the shortstop. Look what the Padres did, right? How many shortstop have they moved to the outfield, to second base, to third base? Shortstops are versatile. I don't worry about shortstops moving within the infield. I don't worry about that at all. Well, Easy, you're not going to get Alcantara and Castillo and Crochet. Oh, would you be a trade? I'm sorry. I knew you meant all of them. I was going to say, man, I do that tomorrow, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Yeah, I agree with you. Alcantara, again, first year after Tommy John scares the hell out of me. I don't trust that at all. Now, you might get him for the cheap and hope he's good, but there's no guarantee he's going to be healthy. That worries me. Castillo is probably – well, Montgomery, I don't think the Diamondbacks are trading Zach Gallen. Montgomery's definitely an option, but you can't trade Montgomery to be your ace. That's the thing that I worry about. You could probably get him for cheap because you're going to take on that contract, but you're going to have to, Montgomery is going to probably replace Manaea, to be quite honest with you, if you trade for Montgomery. Yeah, then you don't need an all-star at every position. I think that's a fact, right? I mean, the Dodgers finally won, but I mean, how many years did it take them, signing star after star and trading for star after star to finally win? So it's not the perfect recipe, right? The Dodgers finally won after all the years of signing and trading for the best players, basically. And it finally took them all these years to win their first real World Series since 1988. So I don't think we can go too crazy when it comes to buying free agents wins you championships, but it helps. It definitely helps. All right, guys. So let's finish up the stream by talking about where we started. The Mets signed Frankie Montas late last night to a 2-year, $34 million a year deal. It is an opt-out after the first year. So it's a 1-year deal, $17 million. It's a guy that's going to be a 5th or 6th starter. That's not a concern. This is not going to stop you from getting Manaea or Severino or one of the big-time starting pitchers on the market or in the trade market. Don't worry about that. This is one of many moves for the rotation. Montas is just a piece of the puzzle, guys. Right? You can do a lot worse than a 5th or 6th starter. That's a Frankie Montas. You could do a lot worse than that. And back end of the rotation, guys, you need innings. Montas will do that. Even if he throws to a ERA that he had last year of a 4.5, 4.46 ERA. He gives you innings. It gives you a chance to win every 5th day. That's what you look for, right? That's what we look for Quintana, right? Everybody wanted Quintana off the team, but Quintana, when he pitched well, what did you need from him? You needed length, and you needed him to give you quality starts. You needed him to give your team a chance to win. That's what 5th and 6th starters do. And yes, Montas replaces Quintana probably. And that's what I was thinking too when that signing was made. Right? So this is another situation where if Montas has a good season, he's going back on the market. He's opting out, and he's going back on the market for a multi-year deal. If he doesn't have a good year and has a similar year to last year, he'll just take the opt-in. And you could do a lot worse for $17 million as an average pitcher, because it's going to be a lot more than that. So 2 years, $34 million for Montas. We got about 6 days until the winter meetings. There's going to be a ton of news probably coming. Juan Soto watch is in effect. I think Juan Soto is going to sign probably sometime at the end of this week. There's no reason to think that he wouldn't, because there's only like 2 or 3 teams that are in on him, and at this point, and it's the Mets, Yankees, Red Sox most likely. And how much more decision does he have to make? It's going to get done prior to the winter meetings, because then Boris can focus on his other clients in the winter meeting. So once again, guys, thank you for tuning in to a special edition Mets Talk Live on the channel. Make sure you hit that like button, guys, and subscribe to the channel. If you want to get more into the Montas signing and the stats and everything else, I go deep into the video that I put up last night. Make sure you check out that video, the Frankie Montas breaking news, signing him for 2 years, $34 million. Thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, guys. If you're at work, hopefully work goes fast for you. Have a great day, guys. Have a great Monday. Let's go, Mets. And I'll see you next time, guys. Have a good day.
Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, round-table podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show, and let's go Mets.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken bats, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks